I'm Alli. I came out after 20 years of marriage and I have 3 kids.
I'm Melissa and I have 2 kids and I came out at 37 after an 11-year marriage.
This podcast is about coming out later and the struggles and victories that come with it.
When coming out feels like the end of the world, but it's really just the beginning.
This is the Lesbian Chronicles. Welcome to the Lesbian Chronicles. Again, we have Jaime Blandino here today, thankfully, because I'm missing my Melissa today. So I'm so thankful that you came and to join me today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We'll be winging it since I have no idea what on earth we're talking
about.
That's
the best way, though, in my opinion.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it would be cool to kind of dive into, it's a new year. So I was reading this thing in the New York Times that had like advice, basically, like going into the new year. And it made me kind of think of, in this process, things that I've done horribly wrong and things that I've done horribly right. And I thought it would be cool to just talk to you kind of about advice related kind of to coming out, but also just kind of to any transition when you're changing maybe jobs or changing your whole life, in our case, and many of our listeners' case. And I thought you probably would have a really cool, unique perspective because you've seen likely hundreds, if not thousands of people changing completely their life.
Yeah. And the thing that I feel like already comes into my mind is how different everybody is when it comes to change and their process of going about like deciding on when, whether, and how to make big changes.
Right.
You know, we usually really find out who we are, what we're really made of whenever we're either confronted with a change that we have no choice
to
make, or a change that we're kind of considering leaping into when we're not really that way normally in life, right? Like somebody isn't normally into transitions or changing what isn't wildly broken, right?
Right.
People that prefer stability and for things to kind of just stay secure. Change can be really scary. So I think it depends on like kind of what your relationship with change looks like in the first place.
Right.
But yeah, we can certainly talk about general advice, and maybe, you know, your experience, I think, captures, I think, a lot of what people go through, because you're somebody who really does value security and stability for things to kind of be predictable. And
I mean, it's almost like sometimes like I realize about myself that I would rather have less fun, even. Like it's like if I have to choose between exciting and fun and for sure stable and secure, I will always take stable and secure. So I think
you ended up doing with your life. I love it. So it is, I've done some things horribly wrong and some things horribly right.
Exactly. And one thing
I was like, what does horribly right look like?
Well, I've experienced both. But I think one thing that has come up for me over the last couple of days that I've been thinking about, just in like we've spent a lot of time with our families over the last week, which bring out some of your kind of old tendencies or old, you know, I don't know how you would even
we all regress.
You regress a little bit.
7 minutes we're back.
I had this revelation that it's like not as much when you live with a partner of we're all trying to grow and heal and evolve, but it's also like a question of can I live with your fucked upness and can you live with my fucked upness? It's almost like we're never going to be whole, necessarily perfect, but it's like, is your fucked up gel well with my fucked up, or is it like it doesn't work well together? I guess is kind of something that I like a revelation I came to literally in the last week.
And it's probably both, right?
Yeah.
Some things gel, like your dysfunctions complement each other perfectly.
Right.
And then sometimes they probably clash.
Right.
And when they clash, that's when the part of you that's anxious about, you know, disrupting stability, or that's really dependent on stability for a sense of safety. Like, okay, there's conflict. We're not gelling. What does it mean? Are we still right together?
Yes.
And I really embrace not only you, but your entire dysfunctional family, like all the things that we all bring into a relationship. You start to get really freaked out.
Yeah. And I think even like, I I think in a new relationship, when you're doing like a rewrite of your life, like many of our listeners are, you kind of feel like you have this new freedom to create it exactly the way you want it. And so you're going along, and then you meet someone, and it matters. Like my mom used to say, you marry someone's family. Don't ever forget that. And I remember thinking like, whatever, but it is true in many ways. Not that, I mean, my partner's family is lovely, but it does bring out some things in both of us that are like, whoa, what the hell is that about?
Well, and then when you take the degree of risk that a lot of your listeners and you have taken in terms of what can I expect after I make this incredible change, this huge upheaval in my life? What you just said a moment ago, I think is really striking. Sometimes I'm really into like the language that people use when they're kind of, I don't know, envisioning expectations or going into like a new chapter of life. You said that you would want it to be exactly right?
Yeah, right.
That you have this vision of, okay, I made this huge change. I upheaved my entire life. It has to be good. It has to be perfect.
Right. That's a lot of pressure.
And so, everybody has to be really cautious about how to manage expectations for what it's going to look like, because it's never going to be perfect.
No.
There's always going to be things. I mean, you might have similar, oh, here we go again. I thought I got out of this when I left my first marriage. And then there's brand new stuff that you're like, hey, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, what the hell? Yeah.
Right? This part was actually easier in my previous relationship. What's going on here? So having exact, expectations for exactly what you want. Spoiler alert, it's not going to happen.
Spoiler alert. That's going to be the name of the episode. I think that's really interesting. And then another thing that I like, even before like the holidays, because I felt it coming on, like my anxieties were going up, hers were going up. I do this thing in my life. I do it with my work. I do it with my kids when they're going through something, where I call it like identifying the monsters.
Yeah.
Really like outlining like, what exactly am I scared of? What are the monsters? And for me, like when I was coming out, there were a lot of big monsters. I mean, some of them were, am I going to be alone, completely alone? Am I going to be trying to date and no one's going to want me? Am I going to be broke and not able to provide for myself? Are my kids going to pick my ex-husband because they're mad at me and I'm going to be like, I don't even have them anymore? Yeah. There were all these monsters. And I remember like going through the practice of like actually identifying everyone. And then getting ready for this episode, I sort of went back and thought about it. And like not one of the monsters ended up being a monster. Wow. Like there were not one ended up being what
because they didn't end up happening, or they didn't end up
happening. Like it was like, it was like everything that I spent bandwidth on was fruitless. Like it didn't come to fruition that my parents left me. It didn't come to fruition that my kids weren't supportive.
But what's interesting, Alli, you didn't actually name what you named as your monsters.
Yeah.
Were things like fear.
Yes.
Certainty, worries, the what ifs, and there's an endless supply of those, because those things translate into specific thoughts. What if my kids, end up hating me? What if
they don't want to be here?
Right. So it's interesting that you think the monsters are the outcomes that you're most afraid of, but the monsters are actually your fear of the possibility.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Right? Yeah, it's like it's all fear.
Right. And when you use, okay, well, that didn't happen as a way to measure relief, you still end up really attaching yourself to outcome as being the metric of I'm okay.
Okay.
What we need to do instead is align yourself with, I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to have uncertainty. This is a part of it. This is a natural, normal, hardwired in my very nervous system. Part of what it's going to take for me. It's part of the price of admission.
Right. The price of admission.
Right. It's the tax you pay on taking a risk, the tax being uncertainty itself. And so if you can say to yourself, okay, well, I'm willing to experience some discomfort. I'm willing to experience uncertainty. That means that there's hundreds of outcomes that I can't possibly really predict. And then when you get to the other side of it and you're like, you know what, those monsters, they actually didn't win. They didn't actually even boss me around. It's not that a particular outcome, because, for some people, the outcome is not great. For some people, the outcome is the parents don't, support, or the kids are angry, or you were lucky, right? Your outcome worked out, but that's not why your decision was the right one to make.
Man, that's really important, Jaime. Because it is like, think of all the people that would be listening to this thinking, oh shit, I guess my monsters all came true. I never should have done this.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. And that's not, that's kind of a dangerous way.
I'm still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still doing that. Like, how do you not do that? Like, what are the tools?
You got to practice, recognizing the monsters for what they really are. The monsters are not a promise of an outcome that you're never going to recover from. The truth is, the monsters, if they're spewing outcome possibilities, like this is going to happen, I hate you forever.
Yep.
I mean, oh, maybe, okay, but that's not the problem. The problem is the fear that the monsters create in you that ends up creating a lot of self-doubt, a lot of static inside, a lot of distraction, a lot of movement away from your knowing, and movement away from your truth and your clarity. So the monsters are going to be there because, 100% of humans have monsters. We all do.
And they're new monsters all the time.
Always. There's going to be an endless supply. There's no way to get rid of them. You just practice building a different relationship with them. Like, I see you, monsters. I know you're there. Yeah. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. Thank you for trying to keep things, predictable for me. That's how I like it.
Kind of like embracing the monsters.
You got to embrace it. Put them in the back seat. They don't get to drive or be your co-pilot, and they don't get to pick the snacks.
Yeah, they don't get to pick the snacks.
They can come along for the ride.
Well, do you notice, like, in your life, like, would you say that you obviously no one perfects it, but like, when do you have anxiety might come up and you're like, okay, yep, I'm anxious about this meeting. I'm anxious about my son's thing at school.
Yeah.
And then what?
Well, I think you have to ask the anxiety or figure out, boil down, like, what is it exactly that my anxiety is trying to tell me? Okay. Is there actually something that I need to pay attention to? Is there the possibility of a danger that I really, can expect to encounter? And maybe I need to problem solve or anticipate how I might manage that if it does happen.
Right.
The kid, for example, who tends to have like meltdowns in public when they have to perform, and your kid is getting ready. I think you just gave an example of, like, your kids, holiday performance. Will my kid have a meltdown? Oh my gosh, he'll be so embarrassed, and then I'll be embarrassed. Okay, well, if it happens, then what? What is your plan? Maybe sit towards the front and have like a cue with your kid, but like, in other words, you work it out.
Why do I go right to sit in the back so I can sneak out? You're in the front giving cues. I'm in the back hiding.
That's so funny. The point is, like, you decide, okay, is it serving me in this moment to plan ahead how I might cope with the situation in the here and now?
Okay, so let's take that. I like that. And let's take that and apply it to, I'm leaving my marriage, and I've never worked a day in my life. I've been home raising these kids, and I now have to show up to a job interview, and I'm scared as shit. I can't get if I don't get it, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills.
Yeah, this is a great example.
That's real shit.
Yeah, it is real shit. And so pull out the real shit from the anxiety and problem solve.
Right.
It's not like we're debating whether or not you're going to have to learn how to do a job interview. Yeah, you're probably going to have to learn some things. But what we want is to take out the distracting anxiety bit, to say, okay, yeah, it's normal. First of all, it's normal for me to have some discomfort about this. It's a really big change. I'm a huge, huge advocate for self-compassion.
Yeah.
In case of this kind of anxiety, because it's of course you have anxiety. You wouldn't be human if you didn't have anxiety. Right. But can we separate out anxiety from what needs to be done so that I can plan and take the practical parts of what my anxiety is chirping, in my ear about, and translate it into some action items that enable me to feel in control.
Yeah, see, I like that a lot because I can still identify the monsters that I do all the time. It's kind of like you still have to, maybe you identify them, but they're not, it's the fear. And then you take those monsters and create kind of a plan, to your point, of which for someone like me that wants control, I want to know the ending. I don't want to be surprised at what happens. It destabilizes me, I feel like, more than other people.
Anytime you hear yourself using language or having thoughts in your head that seem attached to things being okay in the end, or
Yeah.
outcome,
Yes.
you've got to say, oh, there's that anxiety again. There's that uncertainty that I'm so unwilling to embrace again.
Right.
Or problem solving efforts are not synonymous with a guarantee of a certain outcome. You're basically in a practice of constantly taking inventory on what's actually in your control.
Right.
And all those things, by the way, are going to be things that you can start in the here and now. If I can come up with a couple of to-do items in the today, like
Right.
in the here and now,
Yeah.
great. There's my control. The rest of it, not up to me.
Yeah.
Right. I can YouTube, questions to ask during a job interview, or what to wear, during a job interview. And I can do 1, 2, 3, 4 things to prepare myself, and the rest of it is out of my hands.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And that actually reminds me of some advice that I thought of too, with when you meet someone. I noticed, or like, a lot of times, like I might be in an elevator with someone, or I might be like in this situation. I'm not out there dating, but if I was, here's what I notice about people in general. They're not great conversationalists, so to speak. They don't ask the right questions that elicit good conversation. Like I think, and I do think that is a skill I have. Like I can dig a little deeper, I can find a connection. But I notice, like, as I go through life, I'll be standing at, maybe at the dog park, and it's like people they struggle with this. So I was thinking about women that are like newly out, having to like go on dates. We have a good friend who's recently single and she's starting to date, and like watching her, she's great at it. But I was thinking how part of it is asking questions that elicit more than yes or no, asking questions that create a bigger answer. And even just, I do it like if I'm in the elevator, I might not just say, oh, how are you? Fine. It might be like, specifically, like, what are you up to this morning? Or I don't know, you can change it ever so slightly to create a bigger answer. And I think that's something that I wanted to point out for people that are out there dating, because I think it's hard for people.
It is. And you're speaking to, I think, also like the fact that some people have a natural ability or a natural interest, or, like this is a gift that you have, right? You're a good conversationalist, you're a curious person, you're not distracted by social anxiety, you're able to really kind of be open. Therefore, I imagine that a lot of aspects of your journey coming out and starting over in life were not that hard.
That piece wasn't as hard.
Those particular pieces weren't that hard for you. And so everybody has their things, right?
Right.
Easy, things that don't, for somebody else, everything we just described is terrifying. Maybe they have no sense of skill around, how to talk to new people, but maybe they don't mind being uncertain about their financial future, or maybe they have a great job and that's not
for sure. Right.
Everybody has their thing. But to your point, these are skills, we get so fixated on how do I do the coming out later in life, divorcing, all that. How do I do it right?
Yeah.
There's so many things that feel so specific to that, particular journey.
Right.
But what you're actually doing is taking a look at your entire life and how you've shown up in the world and the way that you interact with people. There's so many micro opportunities to learn new skills that have kind of nothing to do with your sexual identity. It's about how to actually talk to people that you don't know at a party.
You haven't had to do it in so long.
At a job, exactly. So you think of it as like, wow, I can set myself up for, a brand new experience across the board, socially, emotionally, relationally. It's like kind of fun.
And show up kind of however you want. Like I always say, like when Tatum left for college, she's meeting all these new people. And I'm like, they don't know you. So you can just now be, this outgoing, not out, maybe outgoing is the wrong word, but it's like she doesn't, when you're in your old world, it's hard to then be different. It's kind of like I always say, I wouldn't want my friends with me on a date. Like I don't want them like critiquing me. But so I do think, and like, do you ever have your kids will come home, they'll meet a friend, and even like my older kids, and I'll be like asking them a very basic question about the person, and they have no idea. And I'm like, well, what did you ask them anything? Like where? So I sometimes think that with my adult friends too, where I'm like, you went on this date, but you don't know anything. Like getting to that place of like asking people questions makes the dinner, the coffee a hell of a lot more interesting.
But you know what, for some people, so is just being in the moment and seeing things unfold organically. There's something to be said for kind of leaning into the awkward silence or making some observations about what's going on in the restaurant. Like, hey, look, that couple over there looks like they're on their first date just like us. That's kind of awkward. Like you don't have to have like a planned interview
to
have a successful experience. I think people are, especially as they're coming out and navigating a brand new territory, to your point, they're getting to reinvent themselves quite literally, right? And so it's like this fresh start. I get to decide who I want to be. But you also can decide to be exactly who you've always been. And this time not apologize for it, or not try to be someone that you're not because you feel like you have to renovate your whole personality to justify why you've done this huge thing, right? So I feel like at the end, it's about finding, your radical self-acceptance, self-compassion. This is hard. You're going to be awkward. You're going to fumble through. There's going to be skills that you need to learn from scratch. There's going to be things you need to brush up on that you knew how to do when you were younger, right? So it's kind of like all of it is just, it's part of the beauty of the experience.
Right. I think that's good. And I think, so that kind of brings me to the next thing I was thinking about, which is over the holidays, it came up for us a little bit, but like, I call it bandwidth, where you only have like so much of yourself to give. And I think that it's really important, maybe thinking about going into 2023 or even just coming out, to like fill your bandwidth with people that, light you up, or that, have that feeling inside of, I left this meeting feeling better. I left this dinner feeling better. Sometimes like Jamie and I will have dinner and I'll literally text you after the dinner, like, that felt so good, or it was so good to be with you. And I think that's filling your bandwidth with that, versus like having these obligatory things you do that with people that maybe detract from your bandwidth. And
oh my God, I love that.
And I think there is like a feel, like everyone I know has people that they're just like, oh, it's awful, but I have to keep doing it. And I've gotten to a place in my life where I really just don't do that anymore.
It's my favorite thing about being in like this particular phase of the 40s, right? You get to be choosy about who you spend time with. No, I love that. I think, you're talking about boundaries, you're talking about knowing yourself, knowing what feeds you, what gives you energy, knowing what drains energy. And when you're doing something really hard, like coming out or making big changes in your life, you need to really conserve energy. Your energy is precious. And so now more than ever, I think it's a really kind of core part of self-care to be really protective of that energy. And there's no, you can still be kind, like if you have to say no to something that you're expected to do, way to do it with compassion. But I think, if self-compassion doesn't come first, then you are at risk for being drained whenever you make a decision about where or how or who to spend your time with.
And I think it's even like okay to be, I know when I was first coming out, I remember like living in my place that I'd gotten right after, and I would like have nights that I would be alone, if I didn't have the kids, I was alone in this house for the first time. And I remember feeling a sense of like, okay, Saturday is coming. Like, am I going to have plans this weekend, or am I going to be by myself? And I would try to fill my time, and maybe it was self-preservation back then, but like looking back, I think sometimes like it's good almost to clear out. It would have been okay for me, like at that moment, to clear out some of the people that I was with at the beginning. Even like my catalyst wasn't good for me. And it's just nothing about her. It was just not a good situation. Like I likely should have let that space be empty so that it could be filled by something else. Like, I guess my point is you don't have to be full. I don't have to have a plan Saturday night at the beginning.
Yeah, that's such an important point. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, am I scurrying around trying to make plans because I'm afraid of being alone or being still? Am I avoiding something, or am I honoring what I really feel like intuitively I know I need? I need to be around people right now. I need to not be alone. And that's a really important difference that takes some practice.
Right. I was going to say, how do you know? How do you know?
Practice. Yeah, because I mean, everybody does things in the spirit of avoiding discomfort. I mean, that's just being human. But if you can really slow down and, like when you see the Saturday looming on the calendar, be like, okay, maybe Saturday morning I'll get up, I'll treat myself to a nice breakfast. I'll have my coffee and I'll just check in with myself. Like, what do I want today? What is my energy and my body telling me? Yeah. Like, does it feel like, productive discomfort to really challenge myself to be alone tonight and just feel what that feels like? Maybe buy myself dinner or watch a movie or, kind of embrace it like with intention.
Right.
Or is my mood right now telling me, you know what, this is going to be the kind of day where I'm going to need to be around my friends, or I'm going to need to plan something, or at least get out of the house. So ask yourself, I mean, if you think about, I don't know, building a relationship with yourself, like you would like a best friend.
Yeah.
We do with our best friends when our best friends are going through hard things. We ask questions.
Yeah. Right.
Like, how are you doing today?
Right.
What are you noticing? What's going through your head today? What do you think you're going to need later? What kind of afternoon is this going to be? The weather's, kind of nice. Sometimes that inspires some FOMO. I feel like I should be out enjoying a patio somewhere.
Right. I should be on the belt line.
Yeah. Like, is that, does that feel inspiring? Like it makes you want to move and do that? Or are you feeling like, oh, I just want to fold in on myself and get in my pajamas and not leave? That's data, right? So like a best friend would kind of urge you to explore.
Right.
It's true for you inside. That's what you do for yourself.
I like that.
There's no right or wrong either. You're going to learn something either way.
Right. And to have like tools, like to your point of like, what do I need? Kind of knowing what your tools, like for me, it might be going for a run, or it might be getting a coffee in a bookstore. What are your tools that are kind of, you can be alone in your tools. It's not like you have to have a friend go with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I love how you're kind of connecting tools with needs, right? Like, if you don't know what your tools are, start with asking yourself, what do I need? And, you might not know. And so if you don't know, experiment. Okay. Well, I don't know what I need. So I don't know. Let me make a quick list of 3 or 4 things that I could do.
Right.
Just like close my eyes and point, pick one.
Right.
And try it out and see what happens. You don't have to know exactly what you need in order to like learn something new about yourself that will end up being a tool later.
Right. That's interesting too, because I have a really distinct memory of before I moved completely on my own, we were nesting. And so we had this apartment in Decatur, and we would take turns in the house or the apartment and just flip flop. And I remember being alone at the apartment and thinking it was this weekend night. I didn't have plans. And I was kind of scared for like what it was going to look like. And I ended up walking. Do you remember when the Ted's Montana Grill was in that building? Well, my apartment was like right there. So I walked to Ted's Montana Grill and I ordered a chopped salad. And I carried it home in the bag. And I remember thinking like, this feels so pathetic. But I remember going back into the apartment, and I even remember like the glass table in front of the TV, and I put the salad out and I turned on a show, and I'm sitting on the floor, like eating my salad. And then it like hit me that I was like really enjoying myself. Like, it's almost like I hadn't even asked that, I was so worried about it being bad and I thought, oh my God, like this feels so good. I'm in my sweats. I'm eating this delicious salad. And it was like this moment of like, shit, this is kind of nice.
What you're describing, I love this story. It's an example of how you almost got caught by a monster.
Yeah.
And the monster in that situation was judgment.
Right. It really was.
Yeah. Like you caught yourself, you called yourself pathetic.
This is pathetic.
You had some expectation that I ought to be doing something different with my Saturday night.
Right.
Judgment almost caught you, almost hooked you in, right? And if it did, and judgment combined with a little bit of a sad mood, maybe,
Yeah, all
is
that.
like a killer combination, right? It could have really, really hooked you in for like a pretty like low night,
Lonely night,
but instead you caught yourself
without even knowing.
Without even realizing, you caught yourself in enjoyment, in pleasure.
Yeah,
you caught
it
yourself
was.
appreciating the comfort of your casual clothes, the option to get your food and walk it right back up to your place, watch
Right.
what on TV. The aloneness in the apartment was like this feeling of respite. So you caught yourself, you removed judgment, and you allowed yourself to experience what you were actually experiencing. Now, for somebody else, that might have been a night where sadness or depression was exactly what you needed.
Yeah.
We still don't need judgment, right?
No, right.
So we can still identify the monster, and we can say, you know what? The judgment part's not helpful. I'm kind of already feeling sort of bummed and lonely. Let me just feel bummed and lonely without the judgment.
Okay. Yep.
And just like be in it.
Sit in
right?
it.
Sit in it. Not every night is going to be, oh my God, I didn't realize this could be
Such a blast.
Yeah. I'm sure you had lonely nights. I'm sure there was nights that you were like,
plenty.
everybody is at a party and I'm here, I just don't, whatever. Like, it doesn't mean that you have to turn everything into some opportunity for, excitement or pleasure or relief or pat on the back or whatever.
Right.
But, you don't always need to shame yourself into it either.
It's true. And I think like back then and even now, like I'll hear people say like, I'm scared if I don't go out, like tonight's the night that I'm going to like meet this great part of my community, or I'm going to meet someone, or like, I don't want to miss this opportunity. But I feel like that's
a classic cognitive distortion. It's superstition, really. I mean,
right.
You could also think of it as like, I could have avoided, maybe the ceiling at that party. And I thank God I wasn't there.
Thank God I stayed home.
See, I knew I should have stayed home. I'm so,
and now of course, like I'm always home, but I do think that night was a turning point. I think Melissa and I have talked about too, like there's been periods of like when you're singing in your car that we were like, we remembered feeling like, oh shit, I'm singing in my car. Like I must be happy.
I love that.
Yeah.
You guys do such a great job of bringing in, and it sounds so simple, but it's the most important thing I teach to my clients is you're self-aware. You are so able to catch yourselves in a moment of experiencing something that is kind of useful or informative or reassuring. Yeah. Right? Like I'm singing in my car right now. Things can't be too bad.
Yeah.
Like in my car. Like I never thought I would get to the place where I'd be singing in my car again. Okay. I'm going to be okay.
Right.
You can practice that, like catching yourself in moments.
Yeah.
Where, in this particular instant, in this particular moment in time, I am okay.
Right.
Nothing really has changed all that much from 2 days ago when I was miserable in my apartment.
Right.
Like, okay, if I can catch myself in a moment where I feel okay, I don't know, that might translate. I might actually have more of those moments in store.
And I think like marking those moments.
100%.
I feel like that's something I don't do that well. Like, I think like marking, there are moments where you're like, it happened this past week when we were with the kids, I had a moment of like joy, just like watching them.
You're so good at marking moments. All your
stories. Like, I feel like sometimes they get through, but I was like, God, I'm really happy in this 5 minutes before somebody starts being an asshole.
Right. Exactly. Because that's around the corner.
Exactly.
To absorb it, that is like nutrients to your tattered nervous system.
Right.
Through this like hellish experience.
Our nervous system.
It is. It's like you're just nourishing and putting warm liquid, like on all the little places inside that feel cold and scared and alone.
Yeah, that's such a good metaphor.
It is. Yeah. So the idea of like, sort of pausing to notice it, soak it up and really feel it. That's like the best thing you can do for your healing mind and body after going through hard things.
Right. I love that. I love that you think that I do that, but I feel like I could do it more, and I'm going to work on that.
You don't give yourself nearly enough credit for the skills you have around like regulating your anxiety. Cause I know you have anxiety.
Yeah, massively.
People do. but you actually have a lot of skills that I think your listeners can probably really learn from just hearing you. And they probably don't, you probably don't like identify them the way that I do because I'm, trained to identify them. But things that you just said, like the chopped salad story, realizing like, I'm actually okay here. I can be anxious about my future and sort of be kind of enjoying this at the same time.
Yeah.
And let me take that in. Let me notice that and take it in and file it away even.
That's it. And like remember the
Rolodex.
details of the moment.
Remember these details. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're defining, actually.
Right. That one was very defining for me in particular. Like I remember all of it. I remember all of it, just the way the table felt, even this last day. I just remember it.
And you're filing those little moments under, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
That's the title. That's the label on that file. I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
And let every day be this like scavenger hunt
of the I'm going to be okays
that you can file under the I'm going to be okay.
Right.
And it can be as small as you struck up a conversation with the cashier at Kroger when you were buying your kombucha, right?
Right. Which there's always these opportunities. They're everywhere.
You just got to look for them. Yeah. They're so everywhere. And you don't have to pretend. I mean, it's not like you're going to, screw a smile on your face and just like grit your teeth through the day. It's about finding genuine moments of, while I'm feeling really sad and anxious, I'm also noticing like there's a beautiful sunset happening.
Right.
If I can notice a sunset while I'm in the thick of my hell, I'm going to be okay. File that under I'm going to be okay.
Yes. And just like you said, throughout the day, look for those I'm going to be okay moments.
Yeah.
Instead of looking for the tendency to think of all the things that are scary and wrong.
Exactly. And so kind of full circle from where we started, your monsters can lead your scavenger hunt, right?
Right.
Your monsters have you look at all the bits of evidence that you're not going to be okay.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're like, okay, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. You're just trying to keep me safe and have me go back to my old life.
Yeah.
Where everything is predictable, but we've already made this deal that I'm going to be in charge. So thank you for your service, but I need you to get back in the back seat.
I love this.
I can continue to, look for the moments.
Right.
I'm going to be okay. And they're there.
And they're everywhere. And to your point, like the monster, you're not mad at the monster. I mean, it's doing its job.
Doing its job.
Yeah. I think this is a great place to close, Jaime.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
So welcome. It's been my pleasure. What a great way to start the year.
I know, right? And so Jaime Blandino with Thrive, and I know you stay very, 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 very busy, but your indicator, if anyone wants to reach out, Jaime is, in my opinion, the best there is.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
As a friend and a therapist.
Thanks. Well, I love you. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. See you later. Bye-bye.
Want to support the Lesbian Chronicles podcast? Rate us and write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
We love listener feedback. If you'd like to share your story, email us at melissaandalli@gmail.com. That's Melissa, MELISA, and Alli, ALLI, @gmail.com. Or follow us on Instagram at Lesbian Chronicles.